Welcome to the Pretty Intense Podcast. Thank you for listening. Please hit the subscribe button. I really appreciate that. You know, the bigger the show gets, the bigger the guests get, the more we can do. And then I also start to feel a path for what kind of people you want to hear from. So today's show is with Eben Britton, former NFL player. He played for 6 years. He is now transitioned into a yoga teacher. He wrote a book called The Eben Flow Basic Tools to Transform Your Life. He also has the Eben Flow Podcast, someone that is so masculine, but yet learned how to sort of balance with the feminine aspect of him. And look, these are the answers. This is the answer. Girls and guys, I love listening to how men work. So I think you're going to be just as interested. But men, this is it. This is where you really get the answers to how to really find happiness in your life. Because what you'll hear is that Eben was miserable physically, mentally, emotionally, and he tells how he got out of that and what the important things to do are. I'm really waiting for someone to be able to articulate this stuff as well as he did, and he's such a great storyteller too. So make sure you listen all the way to the end for one of these great metaphorical stories that will just, I think it will resonate deeply. Let me know what you think in the comments. Are there any expressions in football that you use? You know, in some sports, there's always like, you know, expressions, right? Like funny ones that you guys all know.
Oh my, so many that I couldn't. That's such a great question, but I don't know if I could think of them off the top of my head, and some of them are probably not.
Those are the ones I want. Those ones.
Yeah, of course.
Something about girls or something about like, you know, kicking someone's ass or, you know, any of those kinds of things.
Let me marinate on that, and I'll come back to it.
That sounds good. We'll close with some disparaging comments and things that you want to hang the phone up from.
Yeah, exactly.
Things that you've evolved beyond.
Yeah, perfect.
Really, I mean, I'm a huge football fan, always have been. Then to come across you some time ago, to go from football to being a yoga teacher and like being spiritual and talking about it, it's just it's becoming a slight bit more popular, but definitely you know, you've been doing a lot longer than most, and so I'm really fascinated by that. And I think ultimately, like, the core question is how do, because I was thinking, I was like, what's the question? The question is, how can a man still be a man and but also be in touch with his emotions and be able to communicate and still be strong? Like, how can you be vulnerable and strong at the same time? Because that seems like the really big gap with men that they, or even I, don't really understand how that can be. But I feel like you've figured it out.
I guess so. That's such a good question, Danica. And, you know, it's something that I've been asked, called, whatever you want to call it, to speak on masculinity more and more, which is interesting to me because I never really thought about it that way. I never thought about anything I'm doing as driving towards articulating what masculinity is in a time when men seem to be completely lost in that and what that actually is. I did a podcast with my brother few weeks ago, and it was masculinity, and that's out. People can listen to that. It occurred to me that as I was stumbling through attempting to define what masculinity is, it was becoming really clear that masculinity isn't really something that we can put words to. Mm-hmm. Like, we can say it's being the king, it's the mountain, it's being the provider, all of these words that don't really paint the picture of what it actually means to be a man, mm-hmm. who's living anchored in his masculinity, anchored in mm-hmm. his, mm-hmm. what I would say, his divine truth of his soul. Mm-hmm. And it's really something that needs to be expressed. It's something that we see when it shows up in our lives. You know, it's not really something that we can talk about necessarily in a way that makes it make sense. I've been reading this book. It just sort of popped out to me on my bookshelf. It's been sitting there for a minute.
That's what
But
books do.
that's what they do.
They
We
call
buy
you and then they call you to finish them at the right time too, usually.
exactly, and it's a book by Osho,
Oh,
and
which one?
it's Intimacy.
Mm.
And I'm a big fan of Osho. I love Osho, and this book, I started reading it like a year ago and put it down. It wasn't really
See?
making sense to me.
See?
Exactly. And then I picked it up again, and it's completely right on time, as it is.
See? So funny how that happens. I mean, it's not funny. It's just, it gets more normal when you get in the magic of stuff.
Absolutely. And he's so powerful, and he starts talking about intimacy as something that all of us really need on a soul level. We really need intimacy, because otherwise we're just floating through the universe completely alone. And everyone we come into contact with is a complete stranger, really, because we're just functioning through these masks,
Fair. Yeah, makes sense.
these layers of identity,
Yep.
of how you relate and who you're supposed to be and what you got to say and what you got to do. And he starts to say that while it's something we all desperately need on a soul level, it's also one of our greatest fears to be seen, because we think that the moment we're vulnerable or the moment we reveal our truth to another being, will be completely destroyed.
Yeah.
And for men, I think in particular, we've really been carrying that belief around, that if we reveal our inner happenings to the people around us, we will be completely destroyed, and we will lose everyone around us, their faith, will lose their trust, will lose their connection. And he goes on to say that, which has been the experience of my life, is that only the person who meditates can be truly intimate. And what he means by that is, through meditation, you come to terms with all of the dark, hideous things inside of yourself that we all have in there. These things that we really don't want to acknowledge, these ugly truths about who we are deep down underneath it all. And until we come to be friends, we reconcile those places in ourselves, we can never really be intimate. And for me, this whole process of becoming the man I am today and putting me on a trajectory to be the man that I'm destined to be in my life, which I would say is still a work in progress, undoubtedly. That journey started through meditation and through this practice of going inside and learning about who I am underneath it all. And I think that, men are in this place. We've got, we've really hammered the money and power as success model. And clearly that hasn't fulfilled us in the way that we believed it would. Like for me, playing in the NFL, achieving this dream that I had from the time I was a little boy, achieving that dream, making millions of dollars, making more money than anybody in my family had ever made, having all the stuff I could ever want, being able to take care of everybody I've ever loved in ways beyond my imagination. There was still this hole inside of me.
The thing that everybody's been telling you as a man that you're supposed to do with money and power, you got, and it almost kind of puts a magnifying glass on what's not being seen, right? It's like I've had those moments in my own career where it's like you have these sort of existential moments where you're like, what's the point of all this? Because you realize when you can buy what you want and do what you want, you're like, but something's missing.
Yeah.
It makes it worse almost.
Exactly. Well, he tells this incredible story. I'm not going to talk about the Osho book the whole time, but he gives these incredible examples of, for instance, Alexander the Great, this incredible warrior, this historical figure who was a conqueror of the whole world from a young age. And at the end of all of his conquering, he had done everything he could possibly do, won every battle, won every war, conquered every land he had come across. And there's this story that his his followers came and found him weeping in his room by himself one day at the end of all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, "What are you doing, dude? You're crying like a little baby. What's the matter with you? You're the king of the world. Like, what are you doing?" And he's
Yeah.
like, "It means nothing.
Oh,
Like
wow.
it literally means nothing that I did all of this, you know? Like all of that
Yeah.
conquering and fighting and war and this rampage that I was on to conquer the world literally didn't mean anything when it comes to me feeling fulfilled in my heart and my soul."
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What does it mean? If you were to put a meaning on it, what does it mean then? Is it really
This is
completely meaningless, or is there something to say about it?
all of these things, these external things, they're great. They're great endeavors for us to take on, some more so than others. These passions that we have, it's all good. It's a trick of the mind that we get attached to the things that we're doing
That's
and
it.
assign the importance, the meaning of our entire life to the thing. That's what we do.
We are meaning-making machines, everything.
Absolutely. So it's like my football career, that was it, man. That's the mountain. I'm going to climb that mountain. Once I climb that mountain, I've done it. I'm
Mhm.
here. I've
Mhm.
achieved everything I've looked to achieve. And then I get there and I'm like, "Oh shit, there's another mountain over there that I haven't even started climbing yet." And I think that's probably the mountain that'll get me to where I need to go, because there's something missing here still, and for me, it's always come down to this thing of becoming whole, because that's for me a big part of what it is, like becoming whole, feeling fulfilled, feeling at peace inside. And that's another thing that's difficult to articulate, because I could say, take care of yourself, listen to what you need, go, jump in the ocean, do breath work, go do a yoga class, connect with your loved ones. All of that stuff is good too, but then again, that's just another little thing that we're assigning all the meaning to, that's supposed to fill us, fill our cup, fill our heart, and make us feel whole. But it's really, that's one moment. The human experience is so vast. We're going to continue to feel like, no matter how much you
Yeah.
meditate, no matter how much yoga you do, breath work, ayahuasca, all this stuff, no matter how much of that stuff you want to do, you're still going to feel. So then it becomes something very subtle. It's this very subtle practice of constantly tuning in to the heart, to your insides, to reconciling all these parts of yourself.
Well, like you
And
said, emotions will always be there.
1,000%.
And
I was
duality
talking,
seems pretty inherent to this reality.
it's completely inherent. And the practice has to be getting good with all of it. And I was talking to this guy the other day, and he said, "Eb, man, I've got my meditation practice down. I do my breath work. I get my workouts in. I journal. I eat well. I've gotten sober. I've radically changed my life. I'll be walking through the park, high as a kite, living on the joy and the light of life, and one
Yeah,
negative thought comes in and my whole day is fucked up.
that's
What
the
do
word.
I do?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, this is where the practice of loving it all comes into play." Like,
Mhm.
that negative thought comes in. Can you learn to be in acceptance of that too?
Mhm.
Because those thoughts are always going to be there. Like
Mhm.
I said,
Mhm.
we do all the stuff, the feelings are still here. we're
Yeah. Well,
We're never extracting ourselves from that. So the practice, then the fucking real practice, you've established this great foundation, and all of this stuff is really important. I mean, I wrote a book about it, talking about the tools that have helped me create some stability in my life, coming out of a lifetime of fucking mental and physical chaos.
hmm.
There are tools that bring us stability and peace. But then it becomes something much deeper and something much more vague, to be honest, because it's about what's happening one moment at a time, and what's your relationship with what's happening.
These things come up, and you have to get to a place where you have a consistent, calm way of dealing with the thing that comes up that's negative. I'm wondering, like, what did you have to turn off, or what did you leave off or turn off now that you have some hindsight from your career as a football player when you were doing that, versus what did you have to turn on or realize? Like, I'm wondering kind of what that delta was, and maybe there was an event, an impetus to sort of catapulting you into the space that you're in now that is, seemingly a big departure from where you were. You at least have done a lot of work. And so was there a moment, and then do you have hindsight as to, like, this hurt me and this is what's helping me?
I finished playing football in 2014. That was a roller coaster because it was this initial feeling of immense relief. Like I had done the thing I'd set out to do. I'd given this game every bit of me that I had, and I had nothing left to give. There was no more rage inside of me. And I remember that very vividly. There was a moment in Chicago. It's such a big story, and this becomes a podcast in itself. I'll give you the cliff notes. My last year in Chicago, it was the bye week. I had flown back to LA because my high school was retiring my jersey. After the ceremony, I'm watching the game, and I'm literally doubled over in agony, thinking I have food poisoning, or I can't tell what's going on. I'm feeling awful, basically, like cold sweats, knifing sensation in my gut, really feeling really bad. And so it took 2 days, because I suppose you could say it's the cliche stubborn man of, I'm fine, I'll make it through, I don't need a doctor. But it's the day we're supposed to fly back to Chicago, and I say, I don't think I can get on the plane. I need to go to the emergency room. Go to the emergency room. I have a ruptured appendix. I need to have an emergency appendectomy. I end up staying in the hospital for a week. I lose about 25, 30 pounds, have to call the team. A week later, I fly back. They're like,
not going to make weight now.
Just take it easy. I had to have a blood test every couple days to make sure all the toxic matter was out of my bloodstream. I was on antibiotics and all sorts of stuff and painkillers, and they're basically like, yeah, but there was maybe 6 or 7 weeks left of the season.
Okay.
And they gave me a month of just lifting weights. They said, Eb, just lift, get your body back, take it easy.
The team?
You still need to recover. So I was in there watching film, lifting weights, really taking my time, getting my body back. So fast forward, finally, I'm back practicing. And I'm sitting there in the film room one morning, and I'm watching myself on film. I'm blocking this defensive end. And it was like this tidal wave realization of, what in the hell am I doing here? What am I doing here? I'm in pain from the top of my head to the tips of my toes. I got to pop pills just to sit in this chair. I'm here thinking it's glorious. And this coach behind me, God bless him, doesn't give a shit. If I left right now, he'd plug somebody else into my spot. It wouldn't matter to him at all. There's a million places I'd rather be.
Yeah, you weren't happy.
I used to want to kill that guy that I'm watching myself block. And I was like, I have none of that left. I have none of that left in me. And I knew right then, I was like, I'm done. I'm done with this. I've given this everything I have, because I can't.
Did you know it was your last year, or you're just referencing it because it was?
It was my last year.
Yeah, I know. But did you know it was before
In
your
that
appendix
moment?
ruptured?
No.
So you're just referencing it because it was, but you didn't know until that moment.
That moment was my last. That's when I knew I was done.
Okay.
And so at the end of that season, interestingly enough, I got a letter from the league that I failed a drug test for Ritalin, which is a whole other story. You can watch the documentary on Take Your Pills. uh, it was a good documentary. It's on Netflix if anybody's
Okay.
interested in seeing that story. But I had been on a therapeutic use exemption for Adderall, taking Adderall for much of the time during my career. And then one day
How
I'd
much does
come
a guy
back.
like you, how much does a guy like you have to take to have Adderall work?
Oh my God, I was taking way too much, Danica. It's a miracle I'm alive, honestly.
Holy shit.
I was taking way too much Adderall. But, my body had totally broken down, and Adderall had been this really great way or really powerful medication to lift me up out of this haze that I had been living in. Cognitive decline. I had a really bad
And so you
back
took that, do you
injury.
take that the whole time you played? All 6 years in the NFL?
After that started the middle of my second year.
Okay.
I was dealing with a ruptured disc in my back and excruciating sciatic nerve pain. And it was the thing that lifted me up out of a really dark hole. And I was grateful for it at the time. And then, of course, I just became completely dependent on it and couldn't function without it. Like, God forbid, I'd sit in a meeting room without some amphetamine coursing through my system. So it was a day I'd come back from this hospital appendectomy experience. I was out of my Adderall prescription. A guy on my team had Ritalin. I thought to myself, it treats the same thing. If I get drug tested,
Oh,
I'll just
yeah.
I'll just say, hey, I had to take a Ritalin because I was out of Adderall, and they didn't go for that. So that letter they said, Eb, you tested positive for Ritalin, a banned substance under the,
Yeah.
CBA, whatever. You're going to have to serve a 4-game suspension next year. And it was
You're like,
this super clear message from Spirit going, Eb, you can be done
that's it.
now.
That's
You
it.
can be done. So your question was, what was the difference? Or what was the moment? What was the delta between turning whatever off that was running that show, turning
Mm-hmm.
something on that's running this show?
Mm-hmm.
And, so I came out of football, and it was this big relief at first because I think to some extent, 90% of guys, I would say, I'm sure you can relate to this, Danica. 90% of the athletes in the NFL, I'll speak from that point of view. From the time you're a freshman in high school, you've got this thought in the back of your head, how long am I going to do this? When is this going to be done? And for football in particular, because it's just this pain game. It's
Oh,
about
it's so rough. People
how
have
much.
no idea how beat up you all get.
Yeah,
I mean, they don't. I mean, I know that you crash into each other, but then you're back next week and you're
yeah,
doing spectacular things. But you guys get beat up all the time. I mean, you're playing with little broken toes or giant bruises on your foot or your leg or your arm and
yeah,
cuts. And that's just like the daily.
yeah. That's just what you're dealing with every day.
It's just playing football.
Exactly. So there's always this thought of like, when am I going to be done? When is this over? When am I going to be done putting myself through this thing? So that day had come for me, and I'm really blessed because there's a lot of guys who are just grinding it out, and the game just spits them out when it's ready, or
Sure.
when it's done with them. For me, the game had kicked the shit out of me. I'd kicked the shit out of myself, and I had released all of this rage that was the motor behind me being who I was on the football field. So there was this relief of being done, but pretty quickly that descended into, holy shit, who am I? What am I going to do with myself? What's my purpose? How am I going to make money? I have no life skills. I can't relate to anybody outside of this lens of me being this superstar athlete. I don't even know how to have a conversation with somebody. I don't know what to talk about. I don't even know what I like.
Of course. Yeah. Knowing yourself is not as easy as it sounds.
It really isn't, especially in this world, in this realm that we find ourselves in, where you're constantly bombarded by social media and advertising and marketing and all of this stuff. And then you lay on top of that your parents and your family and where
Yeah,
they
there's
come
always people
from.
around. Yeah.
There's thousands of people we come into contact with who are feeding us ideas about who
Yeah.
we are and what we're supposed to like and do and be
Yep.
like and all that stuff. So here I am, and my entire life is just crashing over me. And around, I guess it was 2016, end of 2015, beginning of 2016, somewhere in there, somewhere between the end of 2015 and fall of 2016. I was at complete rock bottom. All of the escape valves had stopped working. The 2 hours in the gym, the smoking tons of weed, the bottles of wine, the porn, all this stuff, it just wasn't working anymore. It wasn't bringing me any relief. It wasn't helping me escape the way it once had.
The dopamine hits just weren't, you had to keep climbing and there's nowhere else to climb to.
Exactly. And I was confronted with the reality of my life. I was confronted with the reality of myself.
Can you break that down to like a wound or like a negative thought that you had or something that you knew that you had to go to work on?
It culminated with me screaming into the phone at my wife saying, I'm going to kill myself or I'm going to kill somebody.
Ugh.
As I drove on the on-ramp of the 170 to go to the CBD company I'd started. By the time I got to the office, I could barely speak. I could barely breathe. My mom called me because God bless her, my wife at the time, ex-wife now, love her to death. She's the best. Amazing mom. She had gone to my mother's house in tears and was just like, I don't know what to do. Eb's completely flattened and I don't know how to help him and I don't know where he's at. And so mom called me and said, hey, Eb, how you doing? I could barely speak, And she said, Eb, why don't you come over for dinner? I was like, all right, mom, I'll come over for dinner. So I go over for dinner that night, and it's my mom, my aunt, her twin sister, my godmother, and my brother, Gus. And they just start talking about our family disease of alcoholism and how the chaos that I was brought up in has really informed all of my decision making for all of these years, and how I've been struggling is really tied to this family disease. And we have tools for that, and it's called 12-step programs. And for
got an
me,
intervention. So dinner was an intervention.
pretty
Didn't get caught on
much.
camera, but it was an intervention.
Pretty much. And in the and I was there. I was completely surrendered
Yeah.
because, and that's an important part of this thing when I'm talking to people. It's an important part of this process to hit rock bottom. And one of my great mentors, he said, in this life, it seems like there's two ways to evolve, through insight or through pain. And a lot of people, they need pain to grow. And for me, I had to hit rock bottom and get to the place where I was like, okay, give me something. Just tell me what to do.
Right. What's the one, I don't want to break your story up too much, but I just think it's important because rock bottom is so arbitrary. But is it? And so if you had to put words to what is the final thing that you're not getting anymore, or you don't have, or you're not feeling, or you are feeling, that could be a common denominator in what's considered rock bottom?
I couldn't look myself in the mirror anymore. I couldn't look myself in the mirror. I felt like if I didn't change how I was living and how I was existing, it was either change or die. That's where I was.
So you weren't worth being around anymore, basically, is kind of like you were like, I have no worth left.
Yeah. And, that had come through the stark realizations of recognizing a lot of chaos, a lot of damage that I had wreaked on my life, the people around me,
Mm-hmm.
people who are super close to me, like doing a lot of damage in those relationships that
Sure.
I couldn't look at myself anymore if I didn't change how I was doing things.
I've read something a long time ago that's so true. It's that when people shut down or numb out, or are incommunicative about what they're feeling and what's going on, it's not that they don't have any. It's that they have so much that they don't even know where to start. It's actually overwhelmingly vast as opposed to nothing.
1,000%. And that was my experience. I've been thinking lately how grateful I am to be in this place that I'm at through 7, 8 years of slowly but surely putting myself back together.
Yep.
And the clarity and the peace that I experience on a daily basis that's so sustained by some miracle of God. And really, it's just the miracle of the discipline. It's the miracle of having discipline in the meditation, in the yoga, in all of that stuff, but also the miracle of the discipline in learning how to love myself and learning how to fill this hole in my heart that has been filled. And then it comes and you have moments I feel completely lost and like, I don't know what to do. And then having those tools to just be able to get quiet and see, what do I need here? Do I need help? Do I need to reach out? Do I need to call somebody? And like you said, that insurmountable pile of things that's swirling in your mind, and that's like the credit card bill and the conversation you had last year, and when you snapped on your partner, and when you hit the dog, and then you broke the glass, and it's like all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
And then it becomes like spilling the milk is just a complete disaster. And I come from a family that goes to war to solve problems.
So that was normal too.
That was my programming.
Yeah. So you're actually trying to get to that place, not consciously, but subconsciously from a programming standpoint, that if it's not drama, then it's not. It's uncomfortable.
It's not working.
Right.
If it's not fucked up and hard and somebody's bleeding at the end, then we didn't do it right,
Football.
Yeah, exactly. So, I got to go through this really incredible process. So I went to this first Al-Anon meeting. Al-Anon is for families of alcoholics. I never had a drinking disease, but I had a thinking disease. Like mine was all about my relationship to my thoughts and feelings.
God, I bet that's so similar for so many people with addictions.
Yes, big time.
So much going on up here. It's a coping mechanism.
1,000%. And so I went into this first meeting. It was a men's meeting, which of course was really important and powerful for me. And it was sort of unknowingly, I didn't really understand the significance of that necessarily at the time. I mean, I thought, okay, it's a men's meeting. I definitely missed the locker room and being around the guys of my football team.
Sure.
But I didn't necessarily take into account, these are going to be men who uniquely understand the situations of my life.
Yeah.
And I go in there feeling all sorts of things. And the first guy, the lead share, starts to speak. And he just starts talking about, it's as if he's talking about my childhood, like everything I went through. My parents got divorced when I was 7. I had to become the alpha male of the house, or I took on the role of being the protector for my mom and my brother. And my mom descended into her drinking and really struggled, and she relapsed, and there were fucking crazy people coming in and out of the house, and I just I was codependent. I was the one who had to keep everybody together. I had to make sure everybody was safe. Like I took on this whole role at the age of 7.
Yeah.
That I'd been carrying with me throughout my life.
Yeah. Self-abandoning for sure.
I was a master of that. The master self-abandoner.
Which is, it's what's really, shocking when, because you end up giving a lot of, you end up thinking that the people that are the more abandoning type and the not codependent, but avoidant and narcissistic, that they're the bad ones. But the codependents are just as bad because we're doing it.
Oh, yeah.
I say we, because I have been codependent in the past too, is that we're looking for something too.
Totally.
No streets clean on either side.
An interesting paradox. The woman who started Al-Anon, Lois Wilson, who was Bill Wilson's wife, she was married to the man, Bill, who started AA. And the story goes that her whole marriage, she's looking at this guy, and he is a fall down drunk, bad drunk. So bad. I mean, this guy went to see Carl Jung, and Carl Jung said, maybe if you find God, there might be a miracle for you to get sober, but I don't really know how to help you.
Don't know where to go from Carl Jung,
Yeah, so Bill actually met a doctor named Dr. Bob, and they together formulated AA, the 12-step program. It's the whole time she was going, when he gets sober, our life is going to be changed. Our life is going to be better. And then one day he got sober, and she realized, holy shit, I have a whole part in this madness that I haven't even realized was there yet. So she had to start Al-Anon.
What is the element about Al-Anon that makes it different than AA?
So Al-Anon is for, AA is about, you have a problem with drinking, your brain chemistry changes when alcohol comes into the system. With 12-step programs, AA in particular, alcoholism, it really shortchanges the accessibility when we use the term alcoholic, because there's a lot of people out there who you could also you can also equate alcoholic to narcissist. You are completely blind to how your actions, words, behaviors affect the world around you. And you don't give a shit about it. So you just continue drinking and using and doing all of this stuff, just like laying waste to the world around you and all your relationships without a care in the world. Now, the Al-Anon is really like, so it's not about a substance, but many guys who get sober, they end up going into Al-Anon because Al-Anon has the emotional and mental component of how to start existing as a human being who's striving for more peace.
With just alcohol or any addiction? Or is it just about your fundamental sort of like life upbringing patterns that they're helping you understand?
Yes.
So it's like Hoffman. Is it like Hoffman?
I don't know what Hoffman is.
Hoffman is it's like excavates your entire sort of programming.
Yes, that's what Al-Anon really does. It's about what is your relationship to yourself and your life, and identifying what's dysfunctional, and identifying new ways of being.
Sure. So what was the one that you were like, what was the thing that came through that you were like, oh shit.
I mean, so much, honestly. You do this thing called a step 4. And for me, my sponsor had me write out my life story from my earliest memory.
Oh God, that's a lot.
To the current moment.
Wow.
And you can do it. I'm a writer, so I wrote it all down like it was a story, but you can also do it as bullet points. And that was one of the most powerful experiences of my life, because it really allowed me this opportunity to see where all of my ideas about how relationships are and what they're supposed to be like, where all of that came from, and where I needed to take accountability for myself. And my part in everything I had done throughout my life. And that was a big task. And it was fucking completely revelatory and psychedelic and transformative.
Sure. It's almost like saying things out loud. You know, when you have to say them out loud, it sort of releases a different energy. We can think things. And then as soon as you have to say it out loud, you start crying when you tell someone or
Oh
whatever. It's
yeah.
like writing it out and then rereading your story and deducing it down to 20 pages or whatever your whole life. And then you go, oh shit, that's pretty obvious.
Yes.
Oh.
So circling back again to your question, I realized that my entire football career was about me proving to the world how big and scary and to be feared and strong I was,
Why?
because I was scared
Yeah,
and
sure. You
afraid,
needed to overcompensate. You wanted to
felt like I wasn't
protect the
enough.
inner child that was scared to death
Yeah,
of the drama and the chaos.
exactly. That was a big thing that I recognized going back to what did I turn off, and recognizing, why am I doing things? Why am I choosing to do the things that I do in my life?
Mhm.
That clarity of understanding where my mission to play in the NFL, it was never rooted in the fact that I loved football.
I mean, I was the same. It was never really about racing. When you get to that place that you realize that, you almost like, I feel bad. I feel like I feel guilty in some way or like a fraud in some way, but it's not true because there's a lot of athletes that don't necessarily love the sport. They love aspects of the sport, and that's how I was.
It's totally true. It was very true for me. And I saw there's a clip going around on social media. I think it's a guy on the Jags. I follow the Jags and the Bears because I played for those
Mhm.
teams. He's a D tackle for the Jags, and his quote is, "To be honest with you, I don't even really like football. I just like hitting people."
Yeah, there you go.
And I
Exactly.
said,
I'm sure I was
"Yeah,
at a game then. I think I went to a game. I'm from the Chicago area. I'm from Roscoe, Illinois, which is like right on the state line, about an hour or so from Chicago. And so I have a house in Chicago still.
love that. I love
Yeah,
Chicago."
I love Chicago so much. I don't go there nearly enough. But I probably went to a game in 2012. You were probably playing for the Bears in 12.
12, I was still with the Jags. 13,
Mm.
I was on the Bears, and 13 and 14, I was on the Bears.
Oh, okay, maybe I did. Maybe I did. But anyway, I've always been a Bears fan, and then I had a momentary other team, and then cheer for the
Who was
Bills
the other
now.
team?
The Packers. Because I dated Aaron.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah,
forgot about that.
yeah, yeah. That's why I know even more about football, even though I already knew a lot about football.
That's why you're
Um,
saying the other team.
yeah, but it is the other team from the Bears.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it is. No, you're totally right.
I was wondering a while ago when you were talking about having so much rage in you, and especially after you were done and when you had the CBD company and telling that part of the story, and CTE being
Mhm.
obviously something that,
Yeah.
those of us who wore helmets when we did what we did, um, and that you had said that through yoga and mushrooms and probably
Mm.
meditation, I'm guessing was probably part of that, that you feel like you sort of reprogrammed yourself. So I'm wondering, because that's one of the powers of psilocybin is the neuroplasticity of it, like the creating new neural pathways. So do you think you had CTE? And then obviously, speak to the mushrooms and, what the power of those were and what you really felt like it helped you do.
There was definitely a time in my career, like I said, right before the Adderall came in, where I was living in a fog. And I've experienced concussions. Looking back, I never reported a concussion ever in my football career. And then it wasn't until I was maybe a couple years out and I started thinking about it, and I realized how many concussions I had
Mhm.
and how there were super specific memories I have of taking a hit in practice, or there being a collision with a linebacker in practice that left me in a dark hole for 3, 4 days afterwards, which
Mm,
I self-medicated with cannabis.
mhm.
And I would say cannabis is also probably one of the most important things as far as neuroprotectants goes not only the CBD, but the THC as well. And that was a big part of coming out of football, cannabis advocacy and talking about cannabis as medicine for football players. And that was a whole like other part of my life, honestly. That's sort of what started me in my journey out of football, because it gave me this way to speak about the truth of my experience in an effort to enlighten and illuminate these darker parts of being an athlete, playing football, the NFL, etc. And I've always had this curiosity with plant medicine since I was probably a teenager. I mean, I started just thinking about and being curious of everything from cannabis to peyote. And cannabis I experimented with like as a teenager, and it was hard to do also because you're getting drug tested, and I had to be mindful of that. And I was always a team captain and was terrified of being, testing positive and getting in trouble and all that. Started speaking about cannabis as medicine, and then that really, in my life after football, I was given, this opportunity to just start playing with things and learning and studying and researching and going into that curiosity more. And so I don't even really know how that started, other than I just have always looked at myself as sort of a lab rat, and I experiment on myself with these things. And I started taking mushrooms and started taking LSD and did combo, which is
is that the 1 hour stuff, like the drop, the frog poison that
they
throw up for an hour?
They burn the shaman burns the top layer of skin off and then spackles in this frog venom, and you have this intense purging.
How many dots do you have on you?
There's a lot. I don't know, 20, 30, something like that.
Oh shit. Oh wow. You're like, can you make a great design of this?
They did. You can still see it at times in certain light. They did a cool like diamond shape on my shoulder, which is pretty fun. Combo was amazing for me. It was super important. Maybe one of the most powerful medicines I've done.
I mean, I just heard you purge like toxins, but I don't know about the psychedelic nature of it. I haven't tried that one.
Well, you're purging everything. You're purging emotions and thoughts. It's a purge of your entire being, essentially.
Is this how you lost so much weight after football?
No, I was super. You're hilarious. No, that was a whole other part of my journey with keto and all this other stuff. But that is an interesting question, though, because it actually brings me to my process coming out of football. And it started with, okay, I'm going to get my physical body in order. I've wanted to lose this weight. There's no need for me to be 320 pounds anymore.
Such a great way to step into taking care of yourself too. Like, I think that's actually a really great gateway for most all people when they are really self-abandoning, to start just working out and just making that a priority, because when you how you do the little things is end up how you do the big things. And so when you start practicing taking care of yourself, can be a pretty big cascade effect in life.
Yeah, that was huge for me. And as an athlete, it was intuitive and where I knew I could start. I thought to myself, I'm going to get this physical body in order. I'm going to get my food super dialed in. I'm going to get into the best shape of my life. And then was only through that process did the chaos of my mental experience become really clear. I was like, there's like this stuff going on now, like I got my physical body in order, but there's a whole fucking thing about how I relate to myself in the world that needs adjustment. And that was really when my life started to crash over me and I came to complete rock bottom and felt like I couldn't look at myself in the mirror, and it was just time for me to be gone or change my life completely.
Got it.
I came into Al-Anon, which brought me to therapy, which brought me to meditation, which led me to some of truly my great mentors of my life, a guy named Kirk Westwood, a guy named Joshua Darnell, two of them both medicine men in their own rights. Kirk brought me into combo. Him and Josh brought me into ayahuasca, and meeting these men gave me the green light to start tuning into my truth, my curiosities, my building my own way of being. And
was it helpful that they were men? Is this why, like, I saw that you do men's group stuff, and is it the fact that you had these very strong but yet in touch sort of and calm and in control men? You had a good model now all of a sudden, it gave you permission?
Yes, big time. It's funny you say that too. It's reminding me of this book, Iron John by Robert Bly. I'm throwing out some good book recommendations, especially for the men listeners. This book, Iron John by Robert Bly. Robert Bly is a poet. He's also one of the most profound thinkers, philosophers on masculinity and fatherhood. And my brother turned me on to him few years ago, probably around COVID, and just listening to his talks on fatherhood and manhood and masculinity. And this book, Iron John, is a really important book for men to read.
Good.
And it talks about there's a great mythology of the wild man archetype, which is essentially archetypal character that is the gateway for all men into their soul, into their divine masculinity, because the wild man is not interested in any external thing, any external success, finances, material. The wild man is truly interested in the happenings of the soul, the low down, deep, dark, dirty, thick.
Yeah, well, the wild man is also usually solo, right?
Yes, and there's a beautiful story about the wild man, which I don't know how much time we have, but I'll say that you have to read the book. But he talks about in there, because he goes into all of the ancient traditions and indigenous tribes and the bringing up of the young boys and the rituals into manhood and these things that we lack.
You mentioned that. Yeah, go ahead and finish, and I have a question.
These things that we lack in modern day society, or at least in the West. And one of the things he talks about in there, which I connected with in a moment, was at some point, the young man is initiated into his manhood by something, some experience that he has, if you're lucky. Because for me, I was lucky in that I came out of football, and my initiation was fucking peeling back the layers and learning about who I was on the inside. Like that whole process was an initiation for me into manhood. And I could have completely crumbled, I could have completely
gone the other
left that and gone the other way. But so after the young man has experienced an initiation of sorts and come into his manhood, he meets his male mother. For me, it was these guys, these mentors, because it's giving you the nurturing of your manhood from the man. And there's a lot of tribes where, like, the young boys will be taken away from the mothers and they'll just go and live with the men for, the next decade of their lives to learn about how to be a man.
I tell you what, when you see like single family households and when there isn't a man, there isn't a father around, it's not ideal, man. It's not good.
No, it's not ideal.
It's not that women can't raise great human beings, but there is something very special about having a man in the house. What could be an important rite of passage that transitions a boy to a man, and what age should that happen at?
I'll just tell you the snippets of the story of the wild man. And this will give you some idea. And there's this forest on the edge of a kingdom, and every day hunters go into this forest and they never come out again. So the king of this kingdom, he shuts down access to the forest. He's like, can't go in there. Fuck that. Can't go in there anymore. People don't come out of that forest. So one day, a young hunter from out of town comes to the king, and he says, hey, I'm here. I'm looking for an adventure. Give me something dangerous to do. What do you got? The king goes, well, there's a forest at the edge of the kingdom that nobody ever comes out of. He's like, great, I got it. The young hunter goes in there unarmed with just his dog. And he's walking through the forest. And they come upon this little pond. And the young hunter just takes note of the pond. He's super cool. He's collected. He's just like observing the surroundings. And all of a sudden, out of the corner of his eye, he sees this hand come out of the pond and snatch his dog and bring it under. And he doesn't freak out. Obviously, he's a little upset that his dog's in the pond, but he just walks out of the forest. He goes and gathers a few men, and they get their buckets. They get buckets, and they come back into the forest. They find the pond. They start emptying the pond of all the water. And at the bottom of the pond is this wild man. He's covered in hair. His dog's there. He's totally alone. He's aloof. They capture him. They bring him back into the kingdom. They say, this is the guy that's been causing all your problems. They put him in a cage in the center of town. Now the king locks the cage, and he gives the key to the queen. And the queen holds the key under her pillow.
So metaphorical.
So one day, the little prince, the young boy, the little prince, he's playing with his golden ball. And of course, he's in the center of town where the wild man is, and the ball bounces and it rolls into the cage of the wild man. And the little boy's like, oh boy, I gotta go engage with this wild beast that's in this cage. So he gathers up the courage, and he goes to the wild man. He says, hey, can I have my golden ball back? And the wild man says, yeah, of course, but you have to let me out of the cage first. And the little boy goes, I can't do that. I can't let you out. I'll be in trouble. Every boy has this moment where we come into contact with this thing that we know we're not supposed to do, or we feel like we're not supposed to do it because of our parents or our programming. And we resist it. We back away. We're like, I can't do that right now. Eventually, at some point, you come back to the wild man because you're like, I just want my fucking ball back. So I'm gonna get you out of here. The only thing is,
innocence back.
The only thing is, we gotta figure out where is the key. We've forgotten at this point. It's been so long that we've forgotten where the key is. And then we remember the key is underneath our mother's pillow.
Oh yeah.
But the trick is, we can't just go ask for the key because our mother doesn't want us to grow up. Our mother doesn't really want us to become a man. They want us to stay the little boy, her baby, that she can care for and take care of. And the king doesn't want us letting the wild man out of the cage, because then he's like the ultimate weapon against authority. He's completely disconnected from society.
Oh yeah. He's not following along.
So this story is essentially that we have to steal the key to let the wild man out of the cage to get our golden ball back initially. But what we don't realize is really it's about letting the wild man out of the cage. So stealing the key, exactly. Stealing the key. The wild man is the representation of our divine masculinity.
Right.
So the stealing the key portion is what is really crucial. Now, Robert Bly talks about, he would do these men's groups, and he said one night he watched this sort of nerdy young guy drunkenly dance at the after party of the workshop. And he just saw this guy like really like change and transform, and he got into his body and sort of let everything go. And the next day, the kid came to him and he was like, hey, I think I stole some of that key back last night. And he said, okay. And Robert Bly realized that the stealing of the key is a really interesting aspect of stepping into your divine masculinity, because it has to do with essentially going against the grain of society, or freeing yourself from the
Mm-hmm.
constraints of
Mm-hmm.
programming.
Mm-hmm.
That could be
Mm-hmm.
dancing drunkenly at your cousin's wedding.
Yeah.
That could be breaking the chains of a family bond in a dysfunctional behavior.
Mm-hmm.
That could be standing up for yourself at work.
Yeah.
That could be ending a relationship that wasn't working for you anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So these are all initiations in the modern world that men are going through all the time, but it takes courage, and
Great story.
it takes a certain amount of, you got to be like, fuck it, I'm done living this way.
Right.
I'm going to make a change.
Right.
And that's when we begin the process of really tapping into our divine masculinity, of our
Inspiration or
manhood.
pain. Like you said, it's coming from inspiration or pain, the change.
Exactly.
Wow, that's a cool story. Thank you for sharing that. That makes so much sense. I'm curious. I want to loop in sort of the female side just a little, because I'm eternally fascinated with sort of the masculine feminine balance, just with the nature of what I did and just my life and everything. It's like, it's just quite the puzzle. And so I'm curious, being, a man that's done so much work and come to a place where you can teach about it, about this inherent balance that you've found. What is it that man wants in a woman? Like, what role do you want to play? Because I don't think the archetypal sort of man is still like not the man. It's still not something. It's not that that's not a wonderful thing. Like, a woman loves to be taken care of, take charge, lead. Like, there are things that a woman feels really good to be in relationship with. So what is it that you want in a woman, and what is the role as the masculine that you want in the relationship?
I've been in relationships where that was completely out of balance, and it was something that I had to really take accountability for in my own life. And let's attempt to define the man, the male, the masculine entity in a relationship.
Yeah.
It's the mountain. The mountain is rock solid, it's unshakable. People live on the mountain. Things grow on the mountain. It's creating this container, or this structure, for the divine feminine to move and grow out of and prosper and create from. Now, that takes, for a man to become the mountain, takes being rock solid on the inside, being unshakable on the inside, which comes down to having reconciled your darkness, which is a big part of the wild man ethos. That narrative is that you're reconciling the dark, grotesque stuff inside of you that's in all of us. We all have these things that we really don't want to look at, that are too ugly to put out there into the world. But what's important is that we reconcile with it on the inside. And so, to be the man who can show up as the masculine entity in a relationship, you must have done that. You must do that. Now, another important part of relationships is that we're not going into a relationship thinking about the fact that this person is going to give me something. This person's going to fill the hole inside that I need filling. You know what I mean? Like, this person is not going to make me the person I think I'm supposed to be. I'm coming into this relationship as the person I am supposed to be. And I'm being in this relationship. Once again, why are we doing anything? Why are we making the decisions we're making, living the way we are? Is it because we're trying to get something, or is it because it is what we really desire and want, and it fills us? It's because of love. It's because of this undeniable attraction or undeniable urge to spend our life with a person, etc. So then the feminine is the creative, the whimsical. It's the crashing ocean against the cliff. It's the wind, it's the water, it's all of this stuff that's fluid and moving and ever spontaneously just
The rain,
life.
the
Yeah.
things happening.
Yeah, exactly. And you think about that from, a super esoteric point of view. The masculine is always defined in art or in structure as like the phallic symbol. It's a structure. It's a structure, and the feminine is the void. It's the vastness of all creation. It's the space around the structure. So for me, I fucked this up big time in all of my past relationships because I was too much, and it had a lot to do with my football career and having ultra focus on my sport as an athlete. I was super apathetic when it came to just about everything else in my life. I was like, where do you want to eat? Those types of decisions, like everything got thrown to my partner. And that went from the small decisions of what are we going to have tonight for dinner to the big decisions of like, what are we going to do with our daughter? Where is she going to go to school? Is it private, public? Are we going to get our French bulldog fixed? Which, we did, and he fucking died. And it was because I didn't trust my instincts and I just went with the flow. And I didn't set a boundary. I didn't speak my truth. And that was a big lesson for me in that. And looking back on my marriage, I had to go, man, I failed as a father. I failed as a male because for too long I didn't establish leadership. And not that it would have been dominating, but it would have been involved and creating a structure of understanding of us being on the same page.
Sure. And
like,
respected, like something to respect, there's
exactly.
something to lean on. If you don't show that you have an opinion at any point in time, how can I let you have any of them? Because I just have to make them all the time anyway. And so for a woman to be able to just like let her guard down and relax and get vulnerable and be like, I'm exhausted. Can you just handle it? You can't do that.
Yes.
You're always just saying whatever you want. And you all of a sudden take the role.
Yes.
Okay, I guess I do everything.
So then you force, I unintentionally, unconsciously pushed my partner into a position where she had to completely assume the masculine essence. She had to live as the masculine. So that was a really big experience for me in understanding what my manhood actually means. Like, what is my masculinity? Oh, it's about being being the king, being the leader is about creating the boundaries. It's about creating the structure that the people exist within. And that doesn't mean that you're just like judge, jury, and executioner, but you're creating a tangible kingdom that we can all exist in because there's a level of understanding and we're all on the same page about what's the culture. You're establishing the culture of the relationship. So exactly like you said, as a woman, how is a woman supposed to feel like she can just settle into her femininity if she's got to be in charge of every single decision that's being made throughout the day, about the life, about the day, which becomes about the life. Having messed that up and really learned the counter action of all of that stuff, of how to show up as the man, as the masculine force in the relationships that I'm in the relationship I'm in now, I see how that allows my partner to be the woman that she wants to be, the mother, the nurturing, supportive, creative, inspired, divine, feminine being that she desires to be. And I think if that stuff is out of whack, and it comes down to a moment by moment experience of if something is happening that feels out of alignment or out of sorts, we have to address it right here, right now, because otherwise it's going to become this fucking thing that we're holding resentments and we're moving in silence. You know that when you're in a relationship with somebody and you know something's wrong.
Oh yeah.
Like doing the dishes and
right. And you're like, do I say something
meandering
now?
around each other in the kitchen, and
yeah,
you know, you're like,
not
okay,
grabbing your
what's
butt
going
anymore,
on?
and you're like, great, isn't going
You know?
well.
So I think for me, I mean, I feel I haven't talked about this much on a pod, but since we've gone here, Danica, I'm, you know, it feels like it's time to say it, which is, I've really found myself in a relationship where I'm with my complete soulmate, who's the love of my life, and it's like beyond anything I could have ever imagined a relationship being. And that was only possible because I fucking healed myself on the inside first. And then I didn't come into a relationship looking for something or putting something on this person about who they are, what they're supposed to be like. I think that it feels good when that masculine feminine thing is in balance. And you know, every day there's things that come up where, you know, I get into my feminine, she gets into her masculine, but then it's always coming back to this, what's the big picture of the relationship? Like, who's where and where do we find ourselves, and what are the roles of what we're doing with each other, for ourselves, and together, you know? And I think that every man, but this is, you know, this is because it's difficult to speak. Every healed man who's living in his masculinity, who's living in the truth of his manhood, I believe you're looking for a woman who is anchored in her femininity, obviously. And what does that mean? To me, that means loving, supportive, encouraging, creative. I don't know. I mean, it's another thing that's difficult to articulate.
Ineffable. There's a lot about it all that's very ineffable and quite energetic, as opposed to something that language is able to explain.
Yes. Yes.
You just feel it. Like love. You can't really even describe what love is, right? Like that's not even something that's so easy to describe. You definitely can't prove it. You know, that's not something, there's no scientific proof of that. Yet it's probably the most powerful force out there.
There's no doubt about it. And I would say, you know, if you're trying to put words to what love is, it's like true love is this. The first thing that comes into my mind is total acceptance, but it's even beyond that, because there's this really delicious, warm.
Acceptance isn't quite it. It's more, because there wasn't
Yes.
anything that you don't accept.
Yes.
So it's my very spiritual experience I had many years ago was that beyond us, it's all love, and that there's no need for forgiveness because there was never a judgment in the first place. So acceptance is sort of implying something unacceptable. And it's not that when you really love someone, there's actually anything unacceptable. You love them no matter what.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Well, thank you so much, man. That was such a great way of articulating that. And especially just driving home sort of like the core of what's helped you anchor into your masculinity, which is giving you this ability to have this incredible balance in life and be able to, you know, have love for yourself and others in a way that you've never felt before. So congratulations.
Thank you, Danica. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks everybody for listening to the Pretty Intense podcast today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like what you heard today and you want to hear more, please click on the subscribe button.